That just fell down. This feels like a sign. We are falling apart here, guys, as the season comes to its end. That fell down the other day. Maybe it's time to shut up shop. But before that, let's dive into a Champions League final reaction. You find us at a dusty James Allcott studio. And we're going to have a look at this game. Inter Milan, obviously losing this one, but really putting up a fantastic fight against Man City. I will apologise to Inter Milan. And also, we'll give Man City their flowers. But I do want to touch on, right at the end of the video, the sort of fallout on kind of Twitter. Because I thought that was interesting. Very, very interesting how people reacted to it. And I'll be honest and explain how I kind of reacted to it myself. But first of all, let's have a look at the game. And God, it feels naked back there. But look, we press on. We are nearly there at the end of the season. Thank you so much for supporting it throughout. And we've got a belter of a game here just to dive into to finish off as Man City win the treble. 1, 2, 3 trophies in their cabinet now. I got this so wrong. I got this so wrong. But again, like, what I struggle with previews at times is you go, what, I'm not going to back Man City. Like, they're awesome. Now, sometimes you get a gut feeling, and I think you got to go with them, and that's where the fun comes. I just didn't see that with this. I thought that Man City would be far more vibrant, far more calm, that I thought they would have more clarity. I thought they would pop it about better, and they did none of those things. And partly down to Inter Milan's narrow press. Inter Milan's narrow press was really, really impressive in this game. The midfield three in particular. Barella, Brozovic, and Çalhanoğlu worked their socks off. And that narrow press made it really hard for Man City to sort of play vertically into midfield. But also, it was so good because it was a risky tactic. Because it sort of became more so of a, 5 up against the 4, and I guess Haaland as well. But Haaland always wanted to go in deep. But also, the Inter Milan defence actually dropped off quite a lot, or quite quickly. I'll show the average positions in a second. But it was very dependent on that moment of if they were able to break the press or not. And in Rodri and Stones, they weren't able to do that. We'll talk about Stones a little bit later on, because I mean, if you'd said to him at the start of the season, you're going to play centre midfield in the Champions League final at the end of this, for this team, I think it would blow his mind. But, he did, and he stepped up, and it was very, very interesting, his role, which wasn't the initial role, even in, I think, that day's game, that evening's game, that they thought he was going to have to do. So although at times it was, for Rodri, Stones, KDB, and Gundogan, against the three of Barella, Brozovic, and Çalhanoğlu, in terms of the spacing and the pacing of the press, they did absolutely fantastically, these guys, to stop them. Barella worked so hard. Let me show you the average positions, because I think that's interesting as well. It's going to be a bit clunky, the edit here, because I'm just going to do this in one go, by the way. Because, I'm not sending an edit to my mate at 8:04. It's just not fair on the lad. We're all a little bit dusty. It's been a long season, okay? You can hear it in my voice. Let's have a look at the average positions here, because I thought that was a fascinating part of it. And again, shows how sort of compact they were. That into midfield, they made 8 tackles during the 90. And I think it could provide a tactical idea for teams down the line. They're also really, really combative and high energy. I mean, Barella's heat map is always absolutely outrageous. But once again, just getting at the opposition. Çalhanoğlu, who's not really known for that, but I think over the last couple of years, and again, we said it in the preview, we expected Brozovic to play, and you would see that other side of Çalhanoğlu in terms of how hard he would work. And as a trio, with Brozovic as well, who again worked incredibly hard screening that back three, 31 ground duels they attempted in the game. And I think it just shows how compact Inter Milan made the centre of the pitch. And it forced mistakes from Man City, because it meant that they were just unable to get the ball to their high and wide players. If I go back to the tactics board. Often there were moments actually where Ake's on this side actually, isn't he? Because he played on the left. Ake would get on the ball And then he would be looking to obviously play this pass through. And often it was coming down to this left-hand side. And it was just all the avenues were blocked off. That's the one thing I think, look, I understand why Pep did it, because I think you're defensively, you want to be ready for these two. And also the way that Inter Milan played, DiMarco's going to look to want to make those crosses. You're going to have Dumfries sort of arriving late with size as well, as that right-sided wing-back, but really he's a winger. And with those crosses coming in, you wanted someone who was ready to stop those. But I think with the ball, what it meant for me, or it felt like it meant for me, is that natural four and the natural width that someone like Kyle Walker would provide wasn't there. And that meant that they played in a far more central zone. And I think that made it much easier for Inter Milan in this one. I just ran and found it here. So, Ake, just to kind of explain that point, naturally, just as a centre-back, and again, focusing on those two central defenders, will just be that little bit more narrow. And again, these are things that have to happen. I think this is probably the first time that Pep Guardiola has gone defensive over offensive. And it got them over the line this time, whereas previously they've had those ugly games, haven't played with that, fortitude that they normally do, and it's cost them. But in this one, they were banking on, at the very least, having that clean sheet and getting that victory. But that's Ake's heat map. But if you think of just having someone like Kyle Walker in the side, maybe up against an Everton team that's going to defend deep, maybe even play with the back three. I'm not sure if they did or didn't. But Kyle Walker's positioning in this one, even though the average position is pretty similar, it's just higher and wider, just by being a natural fullback. And again, I know this is on the other side of the pitch, but by not having one on either side, I felt like it hurt them a little bit from an attacking point of view. Let's get back to Inter Milan, because I thought they did absolutely fantastically, absolutely brilliantly in their play. They should be so proud of themselves. Created 4 big chances, really pushed at them, 1.68 XG in this game. DiMarco, of course, hitting the bar with that sort of lob header. Lukaku kind of getting in the way. I think overall his chance creation for him wasn't what you would normally expect. He's created 6 big chances in the competition this season, averaged 1.5 key passes per 90. But in this game, he only created 1 key pass. Again, it was jittery from Man City, wasn't it? So the chances that kind of came from mistakes. If you think of it came from mistakes and it came from the press more so than truly creating chances, aside from maybe the last 10 minutes of the game where obviously Man City were getting a bit nervy themselves and Inter Milan totally going for it. I thought Barella's positioning was really interesting as well. Sort of very high, used it as a tool to allow Inter to have options higher up the pitch. I think this was the case for Dumfries as well, which you would normally expect. Not as high as you probably would want. And I think the reason for that was actually the kind of good side of Ake, because he was always there up against him. What I did find interesting was there was constantly that switch from Inter Milan, from the left-hand side over to that right-hand side to kind of get them out of trouble. And actually long passes in general were heavily used in this one. Onana in particular, there was a clear focus. He attempted 21 long balls in the 90, with 10 of them being successful, some of them being very jammy, by the way, because some of them were just absolute shanks. And I thought Acerbi as well is someone worth talking about. 4 clearances in the game. And again, you can see here from these average positions that decision to quickly drop and not allow Haaland, those waters in behind, to attack. But Acerbi had a really strong game for someone who's playing their last game for Inter Milan. He's going to be heading back to Lazio after this. He was only on loan. We can't talk about this Champions League final without talking about John Stones and his role. He said himself he sort of ended up playing as a bit of an 8. Let's have a look at his heat map. It shows how Inter's press kind of made him have to adapt his role. I would have made a different change, but I think I know why Pep did what he did. Because I think there's an obvious change here where you could have swapped it out and you could have put Bernardo into a midfield 3 with Rodri and Gundogan. You could have played with a single pivot to get around this press. And with KDB off the pitch, you could have put Mahrez on and you could have had this, basically. Sorry. You could, and Bernardo being in a more central area, I think he would have done really well in that area and played him alongside Haaland at times. He has been that Swiss Army knife so regularly. And I think you could have had Mahrez over on this right-hand side. But I think this battle, which we spoke about in the preview, was so important. And Bernardo Silva, he was in the wars. He made 4 fouls, but he was fouled 4 times himself as well. He also won 8 of his 16 ground duels. So his battle with DiMarco was a clear one. And I think, again, Pep Guardiola concentrated on the defensive side of it that little bit more and thought, we only need 1 goal here, and that'll be enough. And I think because of that, that's why the change was Foden coming on instead of Bernardo coming out there, because he just did not want to change this side of the pitch. I think that's what I would have done, because I think Bernardo Silva has the ability to do that. And Foden had moments. I thought Foden did okay. But John Stones, what they did instead was, obviously Foden came in, played as second striker. I can't be asked to put him in now. And Stones actually came out here a lot of the time to, be an 8. You got a centre back now turning into an 8 at this stage, and you can see that from his heat map right here. Crazy. You just would not have expected that. Pulling out wide to the right at times to pick on the ball, but here you can see in the second half of the game getting on the ball a lot more. Ederson absolutely crucial in this game. Absolutely crucial. He made 7 successful long balls as well as preventing 1.17 XG, I think it was. But as I say, Stones moving to an 8 in a wider position as well. It just sort of pulled focus away from that narrow press of Inter, and it made it harder for them to get their press structured in a man-for-man way, which they'd done really, really well in the first half. And it also was probably played a part in Rodri being that spare man at the end of it as well, because they were starting to get pulled apart a little bit. And there was never space in behind, but I think when there isn't space in behind, there could be space in terms of someone sort of coming onto the pass. And the goal itself kind of comes from one of the few moments of carving up that they were able to provide Man City in this one. But you cannot get away from how ugly this game was. It's very unlike Man City. But that's the kind of final thing that Man City needed to prove, that they could win in that ugly fashion. The long passes that we saw, 27 accurate long passes per game normally in the Champions League at 70% pass accuracy. This game, they had 27 long passes that were accurate, but at a pass accuracy of only 51%. Again, down to, I think, the occasion and the press from Inter Milan. And just overall, Man City's pass accuracy was down from 87% to 90%. They made 306 passes in the first half, only 206 in the second half. So they showed a little bit more purpose in that second half. But also once they got that goal, were that little bit more careful and allowed Inter sort of to come onto them a little bit. And Inter had chances. Haaland wasn't involved that much. I thought he was never going to get too many touches, only 19 touches in the whole game, but there wasn't that space in behind for him to work with at all. But they got there. They got over the line. And I found it very interesting. Now, the amount of salt and shade that was thrown on Twitter, and I know that's going to rile a lot of people up. So be it. I think on an individual to individual basis, there's a lot of players there that have had a sort of, getting to a point where they've had a sort of long career and have been pushing and pushing and pushing. And individually have been wonderful, wonderful players. And I found myself, and I think a lot of people found themselves somewhat emotionless. And I think that's down to 2 things. One, from a neutral's point of view, this felt inevitable. And I think a great comparison is West Ham and Man City this week, because in a much lesser, smaller competition, those West Ham fans, those West Ham players, the celebrations were night and day with some of the Man City celebrations. Now that comes from the kind of from the consistent trophy hauls that Man City have been able to provide themselves over the years. But I also think there is something in the fact of it being inevitable. And again, that is, I find myself somewhat confused with it. Like, Man City are the bad guys. They've always been the bad guys because they're a nation-state-backed team. And despite bringing in the most soulful manager in football and playing the most beautiful football, a lot of us find ourselves struggling with the ability to give it to them because of the 115 breaches. And on Twitter, everyone's sort of saying to me, "You've got to talk about that. You've got to talk about that." We're all fully aware of that. We're all fully aware of that. But I think on an individual to individual basis, I can be happy for John Stones and Kyle Walker and Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish, and Haaland seems like a nice bloke, and KDB's been, to numerous finals, not been able to get over the line. Pep Guardiola is a genius. And then when it comes to the fans, I think that's a complicated discussion as well these days, where I got a message from someone yesterday, and it was a very incredible message, and it was a guy who'd gone through a hell of a lot with Man City. He'd been there through the whole journey. So again, on an individual basis, he deserves to enjoy his night. And the intensity of which those Man City fans enjoy their night is nothing to do with you. But for me, I see it, and it's always there, isn't it? That's the thing that I struggle with a little bit. It is always there. And that is obviously a wider problem that Man City fans haven't asked for. But at the same time, I've watched videos, I've seen stuff where Man United fans are going to have to start to cope with these kind of people and these nation states having a hand in their club. That is the state of play for the game that we love. Same goes, a few months ago, it looked like the same was going to happen with Liverpool. The same was going to happen with Qatar. So, the stuff are kind of, I don't know. I think that's actually probably the best way I can articulate it. Like, I'm struggling. I struggle with it, and I think it's there, but it's also going to be there for PSG. It'll always be there for Newcastle as well. I think Newcastle fans probably can't see that just yet, and I understand that. But I think I'll be pretty consistent that it will always be there. It'll, you'll kind of see it, and people will turn their nose up at it and will feel emotionless to it. And that is incredibly dangerous overall for the sport. But on an individual basis, Man City fans, and I've got mates who've, again, have been fans since Division 2. And when that trophy comes out and it's got a light blue and a white ribbon on it, I mean, you must, that is the stuff of dreams. And so those fans deserve that and shouldn't have to feel guilty about that. They should be able to enjoy that. If you've decided to support Man City in the last, 2 years, I think you've missed the point. That's how I feel about it. But again, it is a global game now, and people have to pick teams. And people will pick teams not because of who their dad or mum or whoever, uncle supported. They're going to pick it because of they're the best, and they play the best football, and I quite like Erling Haaland. And we all have to live together. That is just reality of 2023. So I get it. And I'll be honest, I much more enjoyed West Ham this week. But if you're a Man City fan, that's not your problem. Turn this video off. Go enjoy the rest of your day, weekend, whatever, knowing that your little team that you used to support that were in the Championship, and Ali Benarbia and Jamie Pollock and what's his name, Nicky Weaver, all those players. You were there for that, then you've done it, And yes, there's too many. You're getting too many trophies now, but you deserve that night just as much as anyone else does. But you will have to do it in a kind of confined space and kind of turn in on each other. You have to do that, what's it called, the thing, towards each other. Because the rest of the footballing world looks at this and understands that it is not totally organic. So as ever, it is grey. And it comes back to the powers that be getting a hold of this. Complex. Let me know how you're feeling about it. What I will say is Thank you so much for watching the channel this year. I've got a few videos coming out talking about the transfer window, and then your boy Jimbo's going to take a break because I've got a lot of ideas, and if I don't get on that soon, then I'm just going to get left behind in this biz, okay? We all need to improve. Only forwards. So, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, and I will see you in the next one.